Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the broadcast. I'm your host, Suze, and with me, as always, is my beautiful co-host, Ash. Tammy is busy right now trying to sell her house and currently has a showing going on as we speak. She will try to jump on and join us when it's done, if she can. And of course, our young Jamie Dave from Perception Correction is also with us, rolling my joints as usual. Ash, Dave, how are you doing this evening?
I'm stupendous.
I'm alive.
Live. I'm alive. No, he's excellent.
Alive.
I was dead last week. Sorry, I interrupted that.
He was dead last week. Yes, that's right. You were sick. I'm glad to hear you are better. Also, a heads up. My co-host Ash here will be taking over from hosting from time to time if needed this evening, because unfortunately I'm dealing with the climate trail induced 100-day cough. So I am hacking from time to time. So if you see me muted, and that is why, and Ash will take over.
Indeed.
So thank you for that, Ash.
Thanks,
Also,
chemtrails.
Fuck you, chemtrails. We also have a couple special guests with us this evening. First, returning guest, Frozen Belle. Belle, thank you for joining us again. How are you doing?
I am doing stupendous as well, or totally tubular, if we're going to go with what I said last time. But thank you so much for having me back.
Yes, thank you for coming back on and joining us again. Also joining us is our good friend on X, Wabbit, whose handle is at Wabbit Warrior. Wabbit, thank you for joining us. And how are you this evening?
Good as always.
It is always.
Good as always. Well, as most of the time, it's always.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Depends on whether I read a Trudeau post or not, and then,
Oh,
then it goes
true.
downhill from there.
This is true.
That's a good way to ruin a day.
Yeah, for sure. So Wabbit, since it's your first time here with us, and I wanted to do a little spotlight on your Twitter page, Mr. Mostly crass, sometimes eloquent and insightful. And he's not a real bunny, everyone, just so you know. You speak out about various issues on X. You're trying to wake people up and promote positive change. For anyone listening who may not know you yet, could you give us a little background on how your Twitter X journey came to be?
Yeah, sure. I think I joined in August of 2020, and I was just kind of trying to reach out and find other people that were kind of like-minded. That was like when we were in the throes of COVID and lockdowns and everything else. And I don't know, everything felt wrong with the world. I was watching my kids like break down in tears because they couldn't go to the park. And I was just trying to, I was living in a very, very left-wing type community down in Niagara area. So it was, just felt very alone, and started up on X, and I found out that there was actually a lot of people out there that thought like me. So, or thought kind of like me. And yeah, it just kind of snowballed from there. So I've had a few things go viral, which is like bump my account to a bigger following. But ultimately, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm self-employed, and just kind of trying to make things work.
Right on.
Awesome. Well, we are happy we have found you. Keep doing what you're doing. I love your page. I know everybody else here loves it as well. So, and again, thank you for being here. I know when we had Belle on last, we didn't get a chance to really dive into the issues, fully into the issues that people are dealing with within the school system. And I know, Belle, you wanted to chat about homeschooling and kind of debunking the myths surrounding that. And I know, Wabbit, you have dealt specifically with quite a bit of shit, with your kids' school and trying to navigate that nonsense. I know Ash wants to have a little talk about hunting, and Wabbit, something about migration, polar magnetic shifting. That sounds absolutely Chinese to me. So I'm sorry if I'm racist now, but let's get into it and see where the conversation takes us. So first, Wabbit, could you tell us about some of the direct issues you have faced within your kids' school that you've kind of dealt with over the last few years?
Sure. So my son is, he's more advanced, I guess, than a lot of other kids too. So he tends to think a little bit outside of the norm, and he's very open about telling us how he sees it. So when something's wrong, he's very vocal about it, and which is a good thing because that keeps us informed, kind of how things are going on the ground. And he initially he actually had a bursary for a private school prior to us moving.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that.
when we moved, there aren't any private schools in the area up here. We were really happy with where he was at, so it was kind of like our first introduction into the public school system.
Hmm.
And that was actually during COVID. So he was basically doing online learning, and we weren't really subjected to all of the trans agenda and all the other stuff going, like the wokeism going on in schools.
Hmm.
So we didn't really know, I guess, as much as a lot of other parents, or just some other parents at the very least, of what the kids were being subjected to until they actually started going to school.
Right.
And you guys are familiar with my buddy Spire. Him and I both
Hmm.
served
Mhm.
together. We live close together as well. So he kind of gave me a lot of the rundown of what was going on.
Hmm.
One of the interesting statistics with his kids' school, they were in a different one. They were in a French immersion. Um, and this kind of speaks to how much of a trend it's become, because they're just so indoctrinated into this. Of the graduating class of his twins, there was 22 girls in the grade 8 graduation class, or formerly. They only his daughter and one other girl were identifying as female.
What?
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Are you
So
serious?
yeah,
There
Look
were
how trendy.
22?
yeah. So there
Oh
was
my,
20
the
that were
statistics.
identifying as anything from a they them to a bird. Like, I don't know.
A bird.
Um,
Oh my god.
and that's like, I started paying really close attention. So my son, when he was in grade 6, this is like all the kids were prepubescent at that point in time. And he came home from school, his first day of school. Like, this was actually his first day at public school.
Hmm.
Oh,
He came home.
wow.
He was visibly upset, and I knew it was going to be a bit of a hard time for him because he's, as I said, like, he's highly advanced, but social skills not always the greatest.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, that could probably be most kids nowadays,
Yeah.
especially after COVID and online learning and all that kind of thing. So, but he came home and he was visibly upset. I was like, "Dude, what's going on? Like, how was your first day?" He's like, "Oh, it was okay, I guess." I'm like, "You guess? Like, what did you guys learn about? You know, the average questions that you would be asking your kids. What subjects are you gonna be taking this year?" He's like, "I don't know." I'm like, "What do you mean you don't know?" He's like, "Well, he goes, I wasn't very happy. The teacher made me stand up and say my name and say my pronouns." I'm like, "What?"
The
He
first
goes,
day of school.
On the
he goes,
first day.
"Yeah, on the first day in front of the class of kids that he'd never met, and in grade 6." I'm like, "Well, what?" So he
Wow.
he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what did you say?" He's like, "Well, I just said I'm a boy. Like, I don't know, what am I supposed to answer with?"
Good
Yeah,
for him.
exactly.
Yeah.
So now that teacher was going on mat leave at the time, and so I didn't have too much of a chance to address it, other than there was a whole pile of issues going on with the principal at the time as well, who's since left, and there's a new principal that's come in, who is part of the LGBTQI
Oh god.
alphabet soup community.
Alphabet soup.
The
Um,
the Rainbow Mafia.
so him and I have had it out several times at this point. Last year, luckily, he had a really good, he had a old school teacher, I guess you could say. And prior to school starting, I actually put this out. I think a lot of other parents use this as a template. I pretty much put my foot down in terms of, I wrote a letter that to his teacher about a week before school, just saying, "Listen, this is what happened last year. Um, he won't be attending. He's if you expect him to be standing up and announcing his pronouns, we're not going to have any of that." He's also, we withdrew him from the sex ed curriculum last year.
Mhm.
So if you're expecting him to be in that, he won't be. If you do have any questions, however, from what he's told me, he actually knows more about that kind of, about the birds and the bees than most of the other kids in the school. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions. He knows everything biological, how stuff works. We've talked to him about it, like if when he's going to go on to his first date, how to be respectful and yada yada yada. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. So the teacher reached out to me, and like prior to school starting, and he's like talking in a low voice because I guess he was around other teachers. He's like, "Listen, none of that's going to happen. We're okay with it." Like,
Mhm.
I was like, "Okay, cool." Also, just so you're aware, any days that the school or the school board is has decided to celebrate who somebody sleeps with, he's not going to be in school for those days either.
Mhm.
I was like, okay, yep, no problem. Like we fully, and we had kind of a respectful thing, and then move further on into the year. Sorry,
Mm.
I'm like talking a lot right now.
No,
No, it's great.
you're bringing up some stuff I was going to ask you about. So keep going.
And actually, Wabbit, like this post went viral. Well, this is one of the ones that went pretty viral for you too, because so many parents were interested in what you said and how you handled the situation. So I think there are probably lots of parents out there who'd be very interested in hearing the full story. So please
Well,
continue.
I think a lot of the time, like with that post in particular, I'm surprised you're able to pull it up that quick. Um,
That's our Jamie Dave.
Yeah.
okay.
Dun, dun.
Oh
So,
no, this was
hold on.
actually so this one was later on in the year. Actually,
I mean, I'm
Dave.
just pranking.
no, it's no problem.
Oh, maybe I sent Dave the wrong. I was going to say, Dave, don't toot your horn because I sent you shit. But
Practicing.
The actual so that one was actually that post that you just pulled up was later on in the year, and that was a whole other conundrum that I ended up dealing with and dealt with into this year, where I've already had conversations with what do you call it, the superintendent, and we've been threatening legal action as well. So
Oh, wow.
I have retained some legal. We're still undecided exactly where we're going to push in that direction.
Yeah,
But
so
we do have a
uh,
case because
wow.
what I did was in Ontario, it's 100% legal to record all conversations. As long as one party knows about it, it's fine. So every conversation that I had with anyone from the school, I recorded as well, just so that I could completely get what they were saying.
Mhm.
So that's what I was going to say. Like, move further along into the year, and this is last year. In May, the school board, and I think all the school boards, at least across Ontario, had sent out a questionnaire. What they call it a climate questionnaire, school climate questionnaire. And what they're trying to do is, or what they say they're trying to do with these questionnaires is judge the climate of the school. Are the kids happy? Are they learning well? And yada yada, like et cetera, et cetera. So
Can I just interject here for a second?
yeah,
Because when you were telling us in our group chat about that whole thing going on, I think it's very misleading on purpose, the phrasing that they use, because um, that whole agenda with the climate is it's on everyone's minds at the forefront. And so when you use a term like climate, it sounds a little bit more, less to do with sex and gender and more to do with something else. And so in my mind, it's insidious that they even use that type of terminology to describe what they did.
well,
Absolutely.
and see, this is kind of they have been doing some of these questionnaires for quite a long time. I think I remember filling one out when I was in high school, to be honest with you. But it didn't have the, to use your word, insidious questions that they have on this one.
Mhm.
So my son, he comes home from school after doing this, and again, I didn't actually know. So what the school board did, or what the school did, was they sent out an email informing the parents. Now it's an optional questionnaire to fill out to start off with. It says that right on the school board website. It is sorry, they're supposed to give parents enough time to be able to respond and pull their kids out for the day if that's what they wanted to do. They sent out the email the night before.
Oh, wow.
So the email went out the night before to the parents. I was busy with work and didn't see it at the time. Come following day, he comes off the bus and he's walking across the lawn and like again like really upset. I'm like, dude, what's going on? Like, how was your day? What happened? He goes, well, they made us fill out this questionnaire. I said, huh? He goes, yeah, and He's like, Dad, why do they need to know what my sexuality is? I'm like, what?
Wow.
So
Mm.
immediately I went into my email, found it, went onto the school board website as well, pulled up their sample questionnaires, and question 24, 23, and 24. The first question was, what is your sexuality? And
Wow.
this is being asked to grade sevens. So a lot of these kids haven't even entered puberty yet, and they're apparently supposed to be making these decisions, or know already.
Wow.
And then
And
share it with adults,
Yeah.
right?
It's
yeah,
With
so
complete
personal.
strangers.
and
Yeah.
the question after that was what is your gender? And so I'm sitting here, I'm reading through, and there was a lot of other kind of intrusive questions into this. But Al also asking like, does your school have an LGBTQIA club? And it was all very much geared towards sexual identity.
Hmm.
And so I was obviously pissed off. I immediately picked up the phone, called the teacher, and I said, "Listen, man, like you and I had an agreement. None of this was going to be put in front of my son." He goes, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize." I said, "What do you mean you didn't realize? You put a questionnaire in front of the kids without reading it?" He's like, "Yeah, well, it was just given to us that morning." I said, "And you put it in front of your students without reading it?"
Wow.
He's
Yeah.
like, he says, "Well, yeah." I'm like, "Okay, so you've just completely broken my trust. Like, I had your word. And that
Mhm.
when somebody gives me their word, that means a lot. And as soon as you break it," I said, "We're done." I'm escalating this. I said, why would you A, not have read it, and B, like just I was flabbergasted that just that he'd put any information in front of the kids without reading it. He was like, "Well, the principal gave it to us that morning and told us that it was mandatory." I'm like, "Whoa. He told you what?" He's like, "He told us that it was mandatory." I said, "Well, first of all, it's not. Nothing's mandatory." I said,
Hmm.
"And second of all, it says directly on the school board website that it's optional. In fact, you're supposed to inform your students that it's optional so that they don't
Wow.
have to fill it out if they don't want to." It's like, "Well, we were told that it was mandatory." So he's basically, it's just I'm just following orders type thing. I said, "Okay, well,
Hmm.
I'm escalating this. So I want to speak to the principal." Got the principal on the phone. Principal immediately goes into teacher voice, so talking down to a parent as if they were a student, and he's in the right, and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
And if you know me, which you guys do, that's
We
not a good
do.
way to approach me.
That's not going to go over very well.
No.
So, so pretty much I put him in his place, let him know who he was speaking with. For any listeners that aren't aware, I'm also a veteran, so I have no issues in regards to working with people and superiors and et cetera. But a school principal is not my superior, and he's nobody's superior. Ultimately,
Yeah.
he's a public servant. So we got into it a little bit, and the whole argument and pushback I kept getting the whole time was, "Well, we're trying to run an inclusive school here." I said, "Okay, I'm glad. My son didn't feel very included,
Hmm.
Hmm.
just so you're aware, and I'm certain that a number of other students likely didn't feel very included either. Did you or did you not? And remember, this was recorded. Did you or did you not tell your teachers that this was mandatory?" He says, "Well, I did, but I don't see that as being a problem." Like, "Well, it is a problem because you broke the law." And that put him right onto his back, onto his back foot. He's like, "Well, they don't have to answer the questions." I said, "You're supposed to inform them, A, that it's optional, and B, that you're supposed to inform them that it's optional." Um, he's like, "Well, they don't have to answer the questions." I said, "That's not the problem. The problem here is that you ask the questions. When you start putting these ideas into kids' heads of things that they weren't even thinking about, that's called indoctrination." "Well, that's a strong word to be using." I said, "But that's what you're doing."
That's the word.
Yep.
Mhm.
So I said, like it or not, I'm going to be escalating this as well because you're obviously not very apologetic about it at all. You're not
And
trying to rectify the situation in any way. So I'm going to be speaking with the superintendent. So
can I add something there?
yep.
Also, the fact that, they say that it's not mandatory for the kids to, they don't have to answer the questions. what kid in grade 7 is going to be comfortable standing up and saying, no, sorry, I'm not answering these? Like, especially if they didn't encourage them to go ahead and leave it blank if they're not comfortable answering. Like, it's just unbelievable that they just expect kids to assume it's okay if they don't answer them
Well,
without
yeah, and
giving them
also,
permission.
and they also said this is mandatory. They didn't say this is mandatory, but you can leave some questions blank. Like they didn't say that.
Yeah.
And
If I
that's
could just add on to what you were
yeah.
saying, I think in what Ash is saying, I think even more importantly is the culture in school actually discourages that kind of independent thought
Yes.
in the students. They have fostered a sense of obedience in these children right from kindergarten, and so it's absolutely ludicrous to then say, to a grade 7 class, well, I they could have left it blank. There has been nothing in the last 7 years of their education that has given them the indication that they're allowed that kind of autonomy. So it's quite ridiculous and insulting for them to then just kind of come and say to a parent, well, I mean, they didn't have to fill out the answers. Yes, they did, because you physically asked them the questions.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
the way that the answers were set up, it was a multiple choice, and there was always at the bottom of the multiple choice was choose not to answer.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
I'm just like I want to be transparent here.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the point is they're asking the question, and they're
Yeah.
asking these questions of children that aren't prepared necessarily to be asked these questions or even to be thinking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which my son, he is actually like full blown puberty, but still not ready for those questions. He's
Mhm.
still he knows, like, his mom and I have talked to him about, all the changes, both that he's gonna go through, that like girls are gonna be going through as well. His mom fielded those questions because I didn't really want to, but like I've talked to him about dating, I've talked to him about girls, I've answered any of his questions, and he feels comfortable coming to me with those questions because we have that kind of a relationship. It surprises me when I find that some parents don't, because I think that's something that you would always want to foster. But I mean, I'm not here to point fingers at other parents or anything like that either. The where we're going with it from here, though, is I have escalated to the superintendent, who isn't exactly being helpful either. So after the superintendent comes the school board. So ultimately, I want to make sure that we check all our boxes in the right way, so that I can say, listen, I tried to follow all the right paths,
Mhm.
and still this isn't getting solved. But ultimately, what it comes down to is all of the different school boards in Ontario pushed out these questionnaires to all of the students. And the whole reason why is because it's the Ontario School Board. It's not the school boards. They had different variations on these different questions, or these different questionnaires, but ultimately the end goal was the same, and the questions were very similar right across the board. Particularly in the case of asking kids what their sexuality was and what their gender preference was and how their relationships are working and so on. These are very personal questions. And one of the things I
Yeah.
actually pointed out to the principal as well was, listen, do you, in your job as principal, you're obviously the boss of the teachers in the school and the vice principal. In your job, do you think it would be appropriate for you to walk up to any of your staff and ask them what their sexuality was? And
Exactly.
he said, no. I said, well, then what makes you think it's appropriate to be asking a child this?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And his
And what would
response?
happen to you if you asked one of your teachers what their sexuality was?
Mhm.
Right? But
Yeah.
nothing happens to them when they're asking children this, and that's really, really bothersome. But the aspects with the Ontario curriculum are pretty, like the sex ed curriculum in general. The whole LGBTQIA has been invasive for a very long time. The sex ed curriculum changed under Kathleen Wynne, and it was written by Benjamin Levine, who is a convicted pedophile. He was
Mhm.
convicted, I believe, in 2016 or 2017.
Disgusting.
Yet they still kept the entire sex ed curriculum on. And if you
Perfect.
read through the curriculum, it's very you can it It is very. This is very invasive. It's asking kids things that they aren't ready for. That ultimately, I think personally, the parent should be discussing with them, not a teacher. And if they have those kind of questions, then they should go to then they can go that they want to go to their teacher because it's a trusted source. Then, okay, but it shouldn't be a part of the actual curriculum itself.
Absolutely. I have a question.
Mhm.
Because I know Belle had mentioned this in BC, and I think Natasha mentioned it too in Quebec, where they kind of like integrate this shit into like every single subject, right, Belle?
Yeah, so in BC, something called SOGI, so sexual orientation and gender identity, and it's essentially been backstopped into the entire curriculum from K through graduation, obviously in varying degrees, but essentially it's not just incorporated into their sex ed.
Hmm.
It's something that's been sort of nudged in at the base level of every course. So it's encouraged that they incorporate some kind of discussion about SOGI in any way that they can, in any place that they can. And so it's sort of this very like nefarious, um, undercurrent that sits just below the surface of everything.
Right. So my
And so it's not you can't even opt out.
So my question, Wabbit, then for you, because you've obviously opted your son out of the sex ed curriculum. Have you noticed, or has he told you of any type of this like SOGI type shit that's like actually being integrated in the other subjects?
Not so much, however, that ultimately, so Soji's a little bit different because it's pretty invasive, like right throughout.
Mhm.
In Ontario, it's almost like it was a half-assed approach, but it's based on the teachers. So the teacher is welcome to integrate it into the subjects, and the parents don't have a say if that's the case. So
Okay,
it's luck of the draw on the teacher you get on whether they're going to include that into the curriculum or not.
gotcha.
Back in my day, it was like a big deal if you found out your teacher's first name.
Back in
Right?
my
you
day.
know, like now we know.
It's so true.
Yeah, now they want
Yeah.
kids to know everything about them, and it's like, just, just you're not that important. I'm sorry. Like the children's education is important, but you yourself, I'm sorry. As long as you're a good teacher, that's all that matters. All this
I
other
just
Mhm.
stuff, no.
I just remembered a story from when I was, I don't know, in grade 4 or 5, maybe. Um, there was this teacher in my school who everybody assumed was gay. He just came across as gay. And I think we were in mass, like we used to have mass like in the gymnasium. And there was some sort of like, pass it on down the thing, like so and so is gay, pass it on, right? So and so is gay, pass it on. And I don't know, somehow I got back to the teacher, and some students ended up pointing their finger at me. And I was the one that took the fall for this, like saying Mr. So and so was gay. And back then it was like a big thing, and he was so offended, and I had to like, I don't know, write him an apology letter and all this nonsense.
You
And then
bigot, Suze.
fast forward to today, and these kids are like literally being asked to disclose this information.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Yeah, I remember that teacher wasn't happy that we called him gay. He really wasn't.
So
Mr.
Wabbit,
Gupuzzo was Gupuzzo. Sorry, I had to.
Mr. What?
Actually blew my mind with the final figuring out your first name of your teacher was a big
oh
thing.
yeah.
Mr. Gupuzzo, I knew his name was Frank. I just wanted to say that out loud.
Just in case he's listening. Just
That's
in case
right.
you're listening, Frank.
Sorry, continue on.
When I was in grade 9, I told the class the name of my math teacher, like his first name, and I got detention.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because my
bitch.
dad knew him, and so I told the well, okay, I was being a little cocky about it, and I said, yeah, okay, Dave. And so
Oh, his name is
I
Dave.
was being a little shit disturber, but
Sick.
still,
So you deserve the detention, is what you're saying.
kind of, yeah. I was being a little lippy.
Oh God. Okay, so
So Wabbit, I don't know if you're completely done telling the whole tale yet, but I know there's kind of an exclamation point at the end that you haven't mentioned yet, and that comes with your son's report card. I don't know if you wanted
So
to get into that as well.
Sure. Yeah. Hold on. Sorry. One sec.
I'm just sitting here going, this is just getting so juicy. Like all these details I don't even know.
Well, okay. So I obviously didn't make a friend with the principal.
Obviously.
You don't say.
And when so they got their report cards like a few days before they finished school, and my son brought his home, and I was reading it over, and I was like, okay, the comments versus the actual grades don't make a lot of sense. And normally my son he's like straight A plus student. So I was a little surprised that most of his marks had moved down into B minus and C category. I was like, dude, what's going on? Let's sit down and chat about this. He's like, I don't know. I like I he was blown away like by the grades. He's like, I tried so hard this past one. I've helped out with the other kids. I've done this and I've done that. He goes, I always hand my work in on time, and like he's pretty much like in the like 95 to 100% on math, and he got a B in math. I was like, what the hell? So I said, all right, we'll take this back into your teacher, and maybe I'm misreading it or something in terms of like, is the class average, and I don't know what's going on here. So he took it into his teacher, and he brought it home. He brought me a new one home that was the typical straight A's. Like, well, what's going on? I goes, well, my teacher told me that there must have been some type of a screw up, because they grade the report cards and then they send them over to the principal, who signs them, seals it, and sends it home.
Mm.
Wait, what?
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, so I was like, all right. So I brought that up as well with the superintendent, and I requested his transcripts, which they have yet to provide me. They don't call it a transcript in elementary school. I can't remember what they call it, but pretty much I asked for copies, because I want to ensure that whatever's on file right now are his grades, not the one that the principal changed them to.
Mhm.
Isn't that unbelievable?
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
probably why, like, a lot of parents are probably like afraid to push back, because they think that, these teachers and these principals or whatever are going to take shit out on their kids, which in this case sounds like that's exactly what happened, or what is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
So
is why so many people are homeschooling now.
well, and
Yes.
we've considered, we've talked about the homeschooling thing, but as I mentioned earlier, my wife and I are both self-employed. We've actually got 3 businesses, so we're pretty hectic now. Like, I could pull him out tomorrow, and he would still do just fine on his
Your
own.
son could write his own courses.
I know,
Right?
He's a smarty pants.
yeah. Well, you guys have all, except Belle hasn't met him, but I know you and Suze have.
Yeah.
And he's a brilliant kid. Like, he taught himself how to code. He's writing his own music. He's a really, really intelligent kid. I could pull him out tomorrow and he would be just fine in terms of like from a scholastic standpoint. My daughter is 7, so I kind of fear for her. But we're keeping a close eye on all of that. And so far for him on the other hand, the socialization, the social skills that he has built being in public school, are I don't know, like it's not something that we would be able to give him. He's not normally a social kid. He doesn't play a lot of sports. He's just not into it, as many as we've tried getting him into. He's got the coordination of like, I don't know. I was trying to think of like a duck or so. He's just not a coordinated kid.
Bambi.
Yeah, like firstborn. He's an amazing kid, but he just never had the interest in sports or pretty much most of the extracurricular activities that we can offer in our area. So, and even the ones that he's done, he prefers doing stuff on his own. So the friendships that he's built being in school are one of the that's probably the main reason we haven't pulled him out. My daughter, on the other hand, I'm just not sure that I would be the right person to try educating her. It's not in my bailiwick. I don't have the patience for it.
Yeah, so that kind of goes in. Belle had mentioned, obviously these issues. There's always the option to homeschool, and like you said, that's not necessarily easy for everyone to accomplish, right? Not every parent is just capable of doing that, and I also so I believe not every parent would be good at it, and it's also hard for these
I think
joint
I
incomes and
think
stuff.
I think though people have a misunderstanding about the options that are available for homeschooling. So
Yeah, so
we could definitely unpack that,
And
but
may I, Belle? And
yeah.
may I? This is a perfect time for this graphic right here, is it
Well,
not?
so I was going to ask you, Belle, you had mentioned, there's myths regarding homeschooling. So what exactly do you mean? What are these myths that you're referring to?
Well, you know what? Wabbit kind of touched on two main ones, to be honest, that are really prevalent, that really do, I think, create the two biggest hiccups for people when they are deciding if they want to keep their kids in an institutionalized education system
Mhm,
or if they want to consider homeschooling. And I think the first one is the socialization aspect.
mhm,
And, there are, just ample examples of why the socialization that we get from a public school system is not necessarily even a healthy form of socialization. And that children that come out of a homeschooling education are often more equipped to deal with real world social interactions than children who are brought up out of an institutionalized education system like the public school system. And then the other big one, and I mean, we can these, and this is sadly, this has to do a lot with the fact that there's a misunderstanding about what homeschooling can look like. There are a lot of different forms of homeschooling, and not all of them include parents being the only and primary educator of their child. For example, I have our homeschool experience is very different between all three of our kids.
mhm.
For example, my high school age son is homeschooling two of his courses. And I call it homeschooling because he does them at home and I'm there to help guide him. However, he is guided through those courses, by the curriculum themselves, it's an online curriculum, and a teacher. Because we are enrolled in an online school. So he has a teacher that does the grading of his courses. He has a teacher that guides him through his English curriculum. And he has a teacher that he can go to if he is struggling with his math curriculum, which is self-guided. It's self-taught through a website.
Okay.
That is also considered homeschooling. For my middle child, while he was homeschooling, he is no longer. He is now in a special education program because he is nonverbal autistic.
Mhm.
But for a time, we homeschooled him, but we homeschooled him in partnership with a local organization that worked with children on the spectrum. And so they actually did the lion's share of a lot of his programming. I was not the sole person that was having to do his special programming. That was done through an organization. And then for my youngest, again, in his case, I am the primary teacher. However, I am following robust and very specific curriculums that have been chosen in partnership between me and, again, his teacher, who oversees our education, who I send work samples to and share with her what we're working on, and who provides me with feedback and resources in order to enable me to be a better teacher to my son. You don't have to be a PhD or have a master's in education in order to teach an elementary school age child or even a high school age child um, at home. And so I think that there's definitely a huge misunderstanding as to what homeschool has to. It does not have to be the sort of hippie granola unschooling type model that we see where people just kind of wing it. There's no curriculum. They've got kids that are grade 6 aged who can't read,
Mhm.
because they're kind of letting them self-guide their own education. It can be a very structured education, but at the same time, that structure can be tailored around the individual child by a parent who knows that child better than any other adult. And so I think, there is definitely, homeschooling can look very different for every kind of family. I actually know a family where both parents worked full time. They have 4 kids that were all homeschooled right through to graduation.
Oh, wow.
So it's definitely possible to do. And one of the biggest reasons is because realistically, the vast majority of actually in the infographic that Dave had up at the very bottom, there's a lot of statistics that indicates that about 75% of the time that students in a public education system are actually at school is non-instructional time. So if you think about it in terms of a 6-hour school day, we're talking they're only getting instructional time for probably no more than 2 hours
Just
out
gonna
of that
say.
whole time.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
And so if you educate if your child is doing schooling at home for 2 hours a day, I know students that are graduating from high school with college level academic standing at the age of 16, and all they've done is 2 hours of schoolwork a day. My youngest son does no more than 2 hours of schoolwork every single day.
Oh, wow.
And he is grade level ahead in math, and he's at grade level in reading and writing, and science. So take that how you want it. I am no genius by any stretch of the imagination. I did not graduate with a degree. I am, just an average stay-at-home mom, but I can follow a curriculum. And I think, any parent that is dedicated to that, and no judgment if that's not for you, but if a parent is committed to that, any parent can homeschool their child.
So do we know if like these structured structures like your own kids are in, like the hybrid sort of options and stuff like that, like, do we know, is this across the board across the country options, or is it province to province
Absolutely.
different, or?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for all 10 provinces and 13 territories. However, I, I, I have been part of homeschool groups that have had communications and contact with people all across Canada.
Mhm.
And for the most part, hybrid, like online learning, is an option in all provinces, to my knowledge. Um, the ability to pick your own school, and for example, in our case, our school is in British Columbia. Our school is an actual like registered educational school, and so the funding that we pay in our taxes goes to that school because we're enrolled with that school. And so, for example, last year my son needed speech therapy. That was covered by the school, just like it would be for them to see a speech therapist at the local public school. But the big difference is that because our teacher is more of a consultant and not our boss,
Mhm. Yeah.
we have control over what my son learns.
Mhm.
And so we've chosen to kind of like stay in this hybrid where we're still kind of stuck having to meet the requirements of the school district in British Columbia, of the Ministry of Education. And so there are certain things that we do have to kind of touch on, but we're in no way obligated to touch on subjects that go against our values or that go against the morals of our family, or things that I consider to be age inappropriate.
Right.
And that's the real control is our ability to choose what we teach our children and what they have to be exposed to, rather than relying on a teacher that we have to have these constant conversations with over the school year and be like, well, we don't want them to learn this, and then trusting them to do the right thing and to have our backs and to respect our wishes. There's nobody inserting their belief systems or their indoctrination into our child's life. We have all the control.
And I had this thought, like, and you guys, I don't know, Wabbit, you may have touched on this in the past. If we were to like pull out like 15%, of parents, if they were to pull out their kids from school, to sort of make a statement and like make the school boards kind of listen to us. It's a relatively small number, right? Like I'm thinking like 15, 20% max. Does anybody, have an idea of what that number might look like?
I haven't had that conversation with anybody. My thing, and I agree with Belle on like pretty much almost everything she's saying there. I think for us is we just have to figure out how we would be able to make something like that work. With my son right now, he's actually in a special education program for gifted. Um, it's something that we don't necessarily want to pull him away from, but I mean, it's different for every parent that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is what I want to do now is I was considering running for politics.
Oh
Much
shit.
as I hate politics,
Run for the school board.
well, that was actually what I was going to say is, um, I'd been in a few conversations with a few different groups that had wanted me to run for MPP. And after a few conversations with my wife, we decided that now is just not the right time for that kind of thing. We don't want that kind of exposure on the family.
Mm-hmm.
However, like change starts at the local level, and so I was looking at municipal, but I think my biggest concern is for the future is my children, and this isn't the lazy way out, but one of the easiest positions to run for as well to affect change, is as a school board trustee.
Maybe easy, but very important.
Yeah.
Well,
for sure.
it is.
Crucial.
Well,
Absolutely crucial.
okay, so look at what's that crazy chick from the mask up
Nilly
crazy doctor?
Nilly
Nilly.
Kaplan.
Oh God.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like she's nuts, and I could probably get sued now, but but she is, so I'm just stating a fact. The woman is nuts, and she ran
She's
for
a
school
few
board
crayons
trustee.
short of a box for sure, that one.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
And she ran for school board trustee and actually got on.
Yeah.
And after she got on, the rest of the trustees realized that she's a friggin' nutcase.
She
So
actually
scary.
she just appealed her whatever the case was against her, and it was denied just recently this weekend, I think. So
What case that was against her?
No, just like point of fact in terms of like getting on. The thing is like with school board trustee, when they come up, it's same as municipal. They have the elections every few years, and it's not even something that I necessarily want to get paid for. I'm not interested in the money. It's just something that I would want to do to try and affect change. And the thing is if we get enough of people that are not woke and are more about morals and values, and if you want to call them old stock Canadians, then fine, call them whatever you want, but we can if we get enough of us on there, we could affect change, and we could affect it like right across the entire province. So
Wabbit, I'm honestly with you on that. I think that there's been enough evidence that our public education system has been infiltrated by the super woke, super alt left.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to get back to a semblance of sanity, right? Like just having regular, average folks who have children in the system, who recognize that there are people that have different values, and are not trying to push a giant agenda that is meant to target our children specifically and create a lot of chaos in their fragile and very easily manipulated minds. I honestly think it's probably one of the more important roles that people are not looking at enough. I mean, I think that if you look at all of the meetings that we see of these school boards and parents trying to get up and be like, how are these books appropriate? And then the school board is the trustees are shutting them down and saying, oh, you can't read those pages because that's not appropriate for this meeting. And we're going, but these are the books that are available in our schools. Like the fact that we have adults that are sitting there telling the parents, oh no, you can't ask questions about that, is a clear indicator that we need better adults in those positions.
Or
Absolutely.
even shutting down the board meetings because they don't want to hear what the parents have to say.
muting the
Yeah.
parents, shutting it down, having the police come in and remove parents from meetings in districts where their children are actually students. They really want custody of our children. They want us to be the secondary guardians, and they want control over what our children are learning. And we need to flip those tables, because as someone who both homeschools and has children in the public school system, I recognize the value of both. And I recognize that both systems are necessary, because there are people that can't homeschool or whatnot. And the problem is that we just have the most insane adults running those systems, to the point where parents are just like desperately wanting to have just a little bit of control over what their children are being taught. And they don't want us to have that, and we just need to take it back.
Yeah.
When you look at like just historically speaking, there's like Yuri Bezmenov was, I can't remember the entire quote, but basically it takes 20 years to completely change and like undermine an entire country and an entire country's systems.
Yeah.
Well, 20 years is basically a generation,
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened, is we're looking at just within 1 or 2 generations, all of the values have completely changed. And it's not that they've changed, we've just lost them.
Yeah.
They've
Every day
dismantled
now,
them.
every day now is a celebratory day of some type of virtue signaling that
Yeah.
like, so Spire and I actually, we had a conversation the other day, because I'll be honest here, like hopefully I'm honest the whole time, but I was asking him, because I don't, he's right into the thick of things with the First Nations. He's up north in Fort Albany. He's helping them he's training their new police force up there. They're taking care of a feral dog problem, whole pile of other stuff, but he's right into it. So he's very much like gotten into the culture, and him and I both understand as well. Like from a political standpoint, I hesitate to say it here just because I know some people will be listening, but the First Nations, the reserves are ultimately run very communistic like. So, like, and it's not an argument I want to get into right now or anything like that with anyone, but looking at it, I was asking him, because it was the Orange Shirt Day and all the other stuff, and I remember Orange Shirt Day going back like, when was the first one? 2012, 2013, something like that.
I can't remember.
I didn't know the full story, so I was asking him like, what is the actual story? Because I know like there's the support thing, and I'm not really into the whole just virtue signaling garbage, so typically I ignore a lot of it. And he gave me like the rundown on this girl that had escaped one of the schools, and the Orange Shirt, and this was like in memory of her and the other children that had been affected by it and all that kind of stuff. But if you notice, Trudeau brought in that new holiday that just happened to match up with Orange Shirt Day, which is the Day of Truth and Reconciliation, which the whole thing behind that was these mass graves that they have yet to even find a bone. And what I find interesting is one thing led from a memory into turning into a like pretty much a new lefty fight.
A political agenda. Yeah.
It was completely a political agenda, and but it wasn't a political agenda before. It was Canadians marching with Canadians, or recognizing Canadians with the orange shirt and all that kind of stuff. So what I said to my son is, I said, listen, if you want to participate in it, that's fine. But remember all the stuff that happened in regards to with any of the Indigenous, with the reserves, putting them in there. Ultimately, all the reserves now they're completely under government control via money, and then the chiefs and yada, yada, yada. But that's what they're trying to do with the rest of Canada. They're trying to turn Canada into a reserve. So when you're marching with them, you're marching for Canadians. Don't worry about the truth and reconciliation stuff and all that other garbage, and saying an apology for the land and whatever. You're not a colonizer. You're in no way a colonizer. In fact, when my family was here before Canada was Canada, so we're some of the in the scope of things, we're indigenous to Canada. So you're marching with people for Canada. You're marching to remember people for some of the bad things that have happened in Canada, so that we don't do them again. But try not to pay attention to the lies, because the lies are the things that get us trapped in the muck, in the mire of one side argues with the other side. But at the end of the day, until there's proof, it's a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And but we're like, I'm getting off topic, but ultimately, like, these are the conversations that I have with my son all the time. Not too much, because he's still a kid, but we have these conversations so that he's understanding that all of these virtue signaling days for one thing after another thing after another thing, this isn't part of your education.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Yeah.
just the garbage that they've thrown into the system, and that's kind of we need to get away from that. We need to get back to math and reading. And you know what? I don't care what they read. Like, if they want
Well, you
There's
kind
I mean, I
of care.
care a little bit. I
I
care a
was just
little
gonna
bit.
say, I care a little bit too, just a little
okay,
bit.
so
Like,
yeah,
the
but I
hate
mean,
the hate you give is probably not a great book, but like,
no, but you know
yeah.
what? There's a lot of books. So, like, look at To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Or
Mhm.
some of these other books that they banned now out of the system that we actually grew up on and like wrote essays on and everything else. And we can recognize, like, it's like they treat the kids like they're retarded. And I know how much you hate that word, Belle, so that's why I'm using it. But
You keep telling me that, but I've never said I hate that word. I just think it needs to be used in the appropriate context. This is the appropriate context.
There you go. Good
but
job,
they do.
Wabbit.
We're all good.
They treat our kids like they're retarded, and
Yeah, it's
like they
true.
can't actually discern information or anything else. And so, okay, so To Kill a Mockingbird, or what was the other one? Like The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and the others, that they'll have the N word in there and that kind of stuff. They know these words are bad.
Mhm.
You don't have to ban it out of the system because of that. In fact, it's a look back at a culture that existed, and something we've learned from.
And how far we've
But
progressed.
what's interesting though is the book that I just mentioned actually contains the N-word, and it is a modern book that is recent, that my son was forced to read in grade 9, that includes all kinds of derogatory phrases, all kinds of references to sex and drugs and alcoholism and racism, and talking about white privilege, and it frequently uses the N-word. And yet that book is appropriate because it drives home the appropriate critical race theory message. And yet a book that has those words from a historical context that we can then unpack and talk about, that's considered not appropriate, right? Like the Huckleberry Finn and whatnot.
Right.
So it's interesting because there are still books being pushed in our school that contain some really horrible themes and some really horrible language, but they've reframed them and said, well, these ones are okay because they drive home the right intersectional message that we want to.
Then they don't recognize the language of the times, like where, yes, we would find it offensive now, but that was actually the language that was used back then.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why it was in the books. You don't ban a book because of that. Now, if depending on, you may not want to be in school teaching like Mein Kampf or something like that, but at the same time, there's some text in there that's interesting as well. Like, I think it depends on, and I'm not advocating for that in any way, but like there's all these books that, like, classics that we grew up on, like I was saying, and they're banning those, yet they're bringing in exactly what you're saying. There's illustrated books on how to give a blowjob in the public schools.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In their libraries. Like, I found one in my daughter's library that she could easily get her hands on.
But my daughter's not allowed to do a cartwheel, guys.
Right.
Don't even get me
That's
started
right.
on the cartwheels.
No.
Oh fuck.
I promise you, my son is doing cartwheels in our backyard.
Oh, my daughter went to, I told them both. I said, you do your fucking cartwheels, okay? Like you do them, and anybody has a problem, you tell them, no, I asked my parents and they said it's fine. And sure enough, my younger one, I asked to pick them up today. I said, did you do any cartwheels today? She goes, yep. I go, did anybody say something? She goes, yep. I go, oh, who? So she tells me who the teacher was. She's like, oh, she just came up and said, no cartwheels, please, and walked away. And then she's like, yeah, I don't care. And she did another cartwheel.
Good for her.
Awesome. What like
Good for her.
that's what was it? Was it Hamilton or Toronto that like banned sledding?
Toronto.
What?
Yeah,
Oh my
tobogganing.
God.
I
Yeah.
think they both did actually. I think it was both.
Hamilton is the
They, like,
password
they
for Hayden
outlawed
in the back.
tobogganing. What's that?
Sorry,
What?
Hamilton was the password for Hayden backstage. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh God. Too cute, Hayden. Too cute.
Okay, the city, not the safe word.
Safe word.
Safe word.
Oh my God.
You know what though? It's interesting because I mentioned this on Sue's post, but it really is just they're all very small and subtle ways of controlling.
Yep.
You know, the earlier that they can teach children to comply without question, the sooner we can get to a nice 1984 like society where people just
That's another
line
banned
up.
book.
Right? Just line up where they're supposed to line up, say the words that they're supposed to say, salute the flag they're supposed to salute, and don't ask any questions. And it really is quite scary to see them use those subtle control methods on something so innocuous like a cartwheel. Like,
Yeah, and I completely agree with you that that's exactly what they're doing. I had someone come to the post who used to be a teacher, and she's claiming that, she doesn't agree with it and blah, 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 but trying to explain to me that it's a liability thing, and that if the child gets hurt and ends up with a concussion and starts telling me about how some girl, ended up with a concussion from a cartwheel and ended up dead, which I have not been able to find the story. But anyways, she's trying to say like, this is why, because the school boards are afraid of being sued. And I'm like, okay, but this is bullshit because they're literally doing a whole bunch of other stuff outside that could also injure them. And none of those things
Correct.
are banned, right? So
And they're
don't
also promoting
that
child
shit.
mutilation. So,
Exactly. Fuck right off.
Yeah, there really
The
is no
Ontario
good
School Board
reason
has more
to
money
defend
than
it.
God. They shouldn't be worried about being sued.
I mean, right? It really is quite interesting though. Like when I hear people who will defend, bad actions by government entities, right? So the school board is a government entity, right? It doesn't matter what anybody wants to say they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really difficult when you hear people in one breath say, well, I don't agree with that. You're right. Like they should be allowed to play. But, and then they go into a long explanation of why they think that government entity is taking those actions and why it sort of is understandable. And they sort of like pseudo justify it in order to try to play this devil's advocate. And I'm going, that is the level of control that they're aiming for, is they want the people that are just indoctrinated enough that they'll kind of go, well, I kind of see where they're coming from. Like they're kind of making a good point because you are one step closer to, well, the government said so, and so we just have to do it.
Yep. Government mouthpieces.
And it's not just
and
that.
it's honestly, those people are the most dangerous in my opinion, because they are just sitting on the fence, and they're just dangerous enough to bring a few people with them. And for every 2 or 3 people that they take to their side of the lunacy fence is one step closer to nobody has any freedoms whatsoever.
Yeah. Did you guys know that 1984 has just been given the okay to be told from the woman's point of view?
Stop it.
So they're rewriting 1984. I wonder how that's going to go.
There's the female version we didn't need, right? We got female Ghostbusters, that sucked. We got female Ocean's 11, that sucked. Now we got female 1984, that's gonna suck ass.
Hey, hold on. I like the female Ghostbusters. What the fuck, man?
It was terrible. It was terrible. It was awful. Oh, it was so painful.
But who's writing this book?
I don't know, but basically like
a gender studies graduate for sure.
The George Orwell Foundation or what have you has given the okay that they can go ahead with it.
Oh my God.
So
The
Yep.
George Orwell Foundation. What is
Like
that?
not the foundation, but basically like I don't
like
know.
his estate.
His
Like
estate.
his
That's it.
estate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoever owns the
So,
rights to his
Yes.
so his woke
literature is
children or his
probably
woke grandchildren?
Oh
Probably.
my
right.
Yeah.
God.
It's the same people who screwed up the Lord of the Rings when they made.
Oh, why?
Oh
Leave it
God.
alone.
Right? We can't just let Tolkien rest in peace. We gotta totally annihilate his legacy.
Yep. So I kind
Uh,
of have a funny story about virtue signaling and someone pretty close to us who's starting to wake up to all this in the schools. His daughter is, I think, 5. And so at first, when we went to the Million Person March, Sue's Wabbit and I went last year together, and he knew nothing about anything that was going on. And he's like, "Why are you guys doing that? You don't even have kids." We're like, "But we care about what's happening to children in the public schools." And he's like, "Well, it's
Mhm.
not happening here." And we're like, "So you're going to wait until it happens in your school before you do anything about it?" And sure enough, he started noticing all the, the woke BS that's happening, and all of the LGBTQ alphabet police stuff that's going on. And so this year, in June, when they were, celebrating Pride season,
Season. You're right.
he decided to just take his daughter to school late. So when they were raising the flag that day on June 1st, he decided that he was just going to drop her off after they did that whole virtue signal ceremony. And so, he was so proud of himself. He did it because he was nervous, right? Like he's even his wife's not totally on board with it. Very like just compassionate thinking towards the whole other side of stuff. So he kind of went out on a limb to do that, and then dropped his daughter off after the fact. And as she's walking away, he's like, "She's dressed in all rainbows."
Shit.
He let
So,
her
I
dress
got a question.
herself, and so she just picked all rainbows. He's like, "I feel like it kind of like erased the message because she dressed herself and she picked all rainbows, not on purpose, just because she likes rainbows." But
Yeah.
No, you know what? My daughter loves rainbows,
Yeah.
and
So do
we've
mine.
just reinforced on her that the only message a rainbow is that it was God's promise.
Yep. I've told my
Mhm.
girls the
And
same. They're
that's it. So like anytime she sees rainbow, she's like, "Look, it's God's promise." Um,
I love rainbows. I have rainbow leggings, and I always have to be really careful how I wear them because I'm
Yeah.
like, I
I
don't
got a
want to give
question,
people the wrong
Ash.
message.
I
I
had
literally
rainbow leggings
You're
too, and then I found out that they were part of like the LGBT thing, and I'm like, "Wait, what?" Well, I don't
Belle's
know, but
husband
I
has
don't have to
rainbow
think about that.
leggings.
well, I
What was
have
that?
I said your husband has rainbow leggings, doesn't he? Like his
No, he does
stepdad?
not. He has unicorn and donut leggings. Thank you
There you
very
go.
much.
unicorn. I have a rainbow phone case, but it's 7 colors, not 6, like the LGBT LMNOP.
Excellent,
There
excellent.
you go.
So I got a question, Ash, because you were saying that your friend's wife was like this is the wine drinking like the wine drinking moms and all that kind of stuff that are like I don't know, I don't even know if they're Gen X or whatever the hell they are. This is she one of those? Your,
Um, I think she's just very trapped in the weaponized compassion.
like is she actually compassionate or is she just afraid of speaking up?
Yes.
I think she's at the point where she thinks that he needs to be educated properly to understand why he needs to be more supportive. So she's nowhere near understanding that, there are harms being done to children, and that like this is actually indoctrination, and
So she's
so
indoctrinated.
yeah. Yeah.
It sounds it. Yeah. Like, has she
Yeah.
been asked the question? Because sorry, her daughter is 5 right now.
Mhm.
Has she been full out asked if your daughter comes home in 2 years and tells you she is a non-binary or a whatever?
She fully
how?
supports it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Oh,
we
okay,
had
so
we
fully
had
fully captured by the cult
Yeah.
then.
oh
Yeah.
dude, we had a friend like that as well. Like she's actually a child psychiatrist.
Oh my God.
Or sorry, psychologist. And her daughter was born a week before my son. So we actually went to the same like when we were doing the doula classes and all that kind of crap.
Mhm.
Because I'll never do one of those again.
Oh, shit.
Wear a
But
raincoat.
no, her daughter went from like beautiful girl, beautiful young lady, and decided to change her name to, I think it was Zeus or something, and
Zeus.
cut her hair all short, and basically yeah, like she now identifies as a boy. She got the
Oh
full
my.
on like she just hit well, I guess she's probably on puberty blockers now, but she was like wrapping her chest and all the other stuff, and yeah.
I'm so
Wow.
sad when I hear these stories because I think about what I was like in high school.
Oh, but
And I think
mom virtue
about
signals it all over Facebook.
but I mean, I think about what I was like and how many struggles I had with like my so-called identity and my, my body image and all of these things. And I think, if there had been these adults in my life telling me, well, maybe you were born into the wrong body, there's a really good chance that I would have listened to some of these adults,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't be the person that I am today, who grew up to be a fully functioning female member of society,
Yeah.
who had children and didn't mutilate my body and can still enjoy all of the things that a tomboy or a a slightly more masculine female person can enjoy. I like hunting. I like doing masculine things. I like fixing trucks, and I like, things that are typically more masculine. And I can enjoy all of those things while still being true to my biology of being a woman.
Yeah.
I just think it's so sad. We have this whole generation of young girls that could just be such amazing contributors to society, that instead of being nurtured and encouraged to embrace their personality differences and embrace, the things about them that maybe are stereotypically a bit more masculine, but in the context of being a woman, they're being encouraged to do irreparable harm to their bodies. And the
Yeah.
fact that our school system is literally ground zero for this kind of indoctrination is just the most despicable thing, that I think we'll see in our generation, to be honest. I mean, I think it goes even beyond, so many other horrible things that are happening in our society. The way that they are targeting our youth and
Mm-hmm.
manipulating them into questioning their own body, and then doing and becoming lifelong pharmaceutical clients for the rest of their lives, is just, I can only think of one other thing that's worse, and I won't even touch on it because it's a whole other can of worms that we don't need to unpack on this podcast. But
Yeah.
there's almost nothing else that is worse in our society than what
Well,
they are
and
doing to the young people.
Yeah.
you
I
have a son
agree.
on the spectrum as well, and it's
Yes.
as so my son, I'll like full disclosure, my son is on the spectrum, but he's very like unbelievably high functioning. So a lot of people wouldn't necessarily notice. They just think he was a bit of an oddball. But he is, and this this whole trans thing is disproportionately affecting them. And
Yes.
because specifically because they're easily preyed upon.
Mhm.
But
Well, and they feel like like they're juxtaposed in society. They
yeah,
already feel like they're kind of like on the
outsider.
periphery, and then you just, it's so much easier. It's like, well, you're already weird, right? And
Mhm.
I say that like, sorry, like, ironically. I don't actually think autistic children are weird, but that's what they feel. They're like, oh, well, I'm already a weirdo, so
Oh no,
like
my kid's
maybe
weird.
maybe something else is wrong with me. Maybe this is, and maybe I am in the wrong body, or maybe that's why I feel this way, or maybe that's why I feel ostracized.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
really disturbing. The only thing that protects my son is the fact that he is also cognitively delayed.
well,
He's nonverbal, but there are literally millions of children that are like your son, who are fully functioning individuals who you would never know are necessarily on the spectrum. But this agenda specifically targets them.
Mhm.
well, and it's like to that point when you look at it, like when we were teenagers, and now like I was I was athletic. I played sports. I was popular. Like I had a lot of friends and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, like we all thought that way. We all thought we were a
Hmm.
little weird. We all like I don't know anyone that thinks back to when they were a teenager and goes, "Oh no, I was perfect. Everything was fantastic." Your body is raging with hormones.
Hmm.
You're constantly trying, like, because of the just society as a whole, and high school society in particular, where it's just the need to fit in. And now that this has
Hmm.
become a trend rage as well.
Hmm.
And I actually I blame COVID for this too, and putting the kids into online. It had already started pre-COVID, but COVID amplified it because all these kids went online learning. TikTok blew up, and everybody's watching all these videos, and you're getting, the Jeffrey Marshes and all this kind of stuff that are basically telling them
Mm.
to stop talking to their parents, to listen to them, and you can
Yep.
trust me, and talking in this soft voice. I love you, oh my pretty, and all this kind of
That's a
garbage.
little too good there, Wabbit.
Yeah, you've been
Well,
That was
no,
a
practicing,
good
eh?
Jeffrey Marsh.
I have, yeah, but
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm just like, this is where, and then you get these kids that are, as you and I both said, they're disproportionately affected, because all teenagers want to fit in. The vast majority do, and even the ones that are like, "No, I'm weird," are like the mods or the goths of our day.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Even that, like, even they still wanted to fit in their own clique. Like, if you walked
Yeah.
around if you ever saw, what was it, Mad Girls? What the hell was that one with
Mean
Lindsay
Girls?
Lohan?
Mean
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 Girls,
Girls,
Girls.
there
yeah.
you go. If you ever saw Mean Girls, like, way back in the day, and yes, I did, so don't you
And you
guys
loved
make
it.
fun of
You
me
saw
later.
you saw it a bunch of times.
But if you saw that and they're walking through the school and they're literally pointing out the cliques, that was pretty much the same in just about every high school.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
ultimately, those kids, they just wanted to fit in.
I
I
have
mean,
to.
And I was
adolescence
one
is
of those
What?
kids.
Sorry.
What's
adolescence
that?
is probably the most major rite of passage that you go through. It's how
Well,
you figure out
Hmm.
who you are and how you interact with the world. Like, it's really, really important.
but now
Be-
you take kids that ultimately don't feel they fit in anywhere, and this is why they're being disproportionately affected. And you're seeing now, like, these kids that are detransitioning, we're finding out they were on the spectrum. They
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they kind of finally, they became adult enough to realize the terrible decisions that they made.
If I may, Wabbit actually went right into a point I was gonna save for the end, but I can't save it for the end because he segued kind of into it perfectly. And me watching as someone that doesn't have a kid, so I've kind of just kept quieted, and my brain has gone to, okay, so what the hell's going on here type thing, right? So
Hmm.
if you look back into like the late 1800s, early 1900s, and you read about that time, books will tell you, like, especially books that tell you about the corruption of the education system, will go to like Rockefellers and like the saying of like, we just want workers, right? Remember that we just
Hmm.
want people that are
Mhm.
excellent workers and just end up being good employees for their factories and whatnot, right? And then if you fast forward to what Wabbit was talking about right now, and he said it started with COVID, but I think it started a little before that. What I'm going to say was, what if that whole concept from we need workers went on pause because they got a fuck ton of them, and they realized, whoa, our population's getting too high. It's time to trim that down. So how do you do
Hmm.
that, right? So if you look at the left brain on this little diagram over here, if you're in the era where you want the workers, which would have been the era where like neocons were in power, and I'm going to say that like this side of the brain, the left side, is focused on when one political party is in power or agendas in play, and then the right one will be focused on when this current one with the depopulation is in play. So on the left brain, you have logical, focus on facts, realism predominates, planned and orderly, math and science minded prefers nonfiction. Excellent for a worker. What are you going to do if you want to create gender confusion and lower your population and whatnot? Screw the left brain. Focus strictly on emotional, focused on art and creativity. Imagination predominates. Occasionally absent-minded, prefers fiction, enjoys creative storytelling. Instead of having a balance of left and right, which would just be in my opinion, the proper thing to do, or just figure out the direction the kid will take and whatnot. Yeah, you end up focusing really, really hard on one to achieve one thing, or really, really hard on the other to achieve the other.
That's a good
Yeah,
point.
actually, it's interesting because I feel like the sort of we, in the context of COVID, we've talked a lot about like social contagion, right, over the last few years. But I feel like that is a hugely relevant term in this instance as well, in that part of what's driving a lot of this is the sort of social contagion aspect. Like we saw it in the 90s with eating disorders, and now we're seeing it again with, you know, this desire to sort of, it's especially prevalent among girls. But what Wabbit was talking about, you know, during COVID and the explosion of social media and the influence that it's having on the young people, you know, actually, Dave, if you could pull up that tweet, the Foundation Father tweet, the one that starts if they're homeschooled, if you could pull that up, that actually it touches exactly on sort of what I'm talking about, in the
Boom!
sense
Sorry.
that where it thank you so much, sir.
Dave doesn't close down. I'm imagining looking at your
He's got like
His
17
tabs.
tabs open for sure.
Two,
like
two
70
screens.
tabs.
Two screens.
17,000 tabs, yeah. But sort of, you know, this is sort of discussing the issue, you know, it's tying into the homeschooling and the socialization aspect, but also into what Wabbit was talking about, in that, you know, we're sending our kids into these educational systems, you know, because we want them, you know, to be around other kids, and we want them educated, and we want them socialized with other people. But when you really break it down to the type of socialization that they're actually getting in these schools, the problem is it's not replicated in any other aspect of real life. It actually most resembles prison. If you really break it down, the way that that children are educated, it doesn't represent a regular workplace. It doesn't represent, you know, socialization with people at the grocery store. It only is replicated in one other place, and that's not where we want our kids to go.
You're right.
And what's really the worst is right halfway down that tweet, it says it transfers influence from the parents to peers and hired professionals. So the problem is you know, we go out into the real world as adults, and you know, we all have the benefit of some hindsight now. We can kind of look back and we can go, you know, that didn't make a lot of sense. But when you're dealing with the young people at that age, they can't see ahead to what is coming ahead of them. They're just experiencing, you know, their everyday in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're experiencing is this bizarre conglomeration of children that are the same age as them, who are stuck inside of a very small space, who have to ask for permission to do everything, who are basically force-fed information that they are not able to fact check, that they are not able to do a lot of research on in real time, and then are asked to regurgitate that information back, and then they're graded on that. And they are, you know, they are told that they should go to only their peers or only their teachers in order to sort of glean more information, or to ask questions, or to get cues as to what is socially appropriate. Well, when you've got a bunch of teenagers, for example, you know, because I think that's kind of the most influential time is their teenage years, right? Like the high school years are brutal. And when you've got a whole bunch of these pubescent, raging hormone filled meat sacks running around these schools that don't even know how to behave, and then you say, okay, now you need to get your cues as to what's socially acceptable from your other peers who are just as effed up as they are, whose brains are just as fried, whose nerves are shot. They're trying to figure out how they fit into the world. They're trying to figure out how they fit in their body. They're getting all of these influence from their peers. They're getting this influence now from social media. You know, I don't see how people are surprised by the volume of young people that are going, oh, well, you know, I think I'm going to identify as an ostrich today because that's what makes me feel good. Because their entire existence is just a constant question as to what's appropriate, what is acceptable, what is normal, and there's no examples in their immediate setting at school of what actual normal looks like, because that system is not meant to look like real life. It's meant to program them for a very specific sort of situation.
Actually sounds like the army.
Right. Or but even in the army, like it's not even as bad as that. Like it's like I would argue high school is worse. Like it's just, I mean, I grew up as an army brat. I obviously did not serve, so you would know better than me, Wabbit, but I mean, I watched my parents. Both my parents were in the military, and I feel like high school's worse. And it's just really sad though, right? And I mean, that is, and again, I'm saying this from the context of someone who has chosen to homeschool my youngest indefinitely. Like, I don't have any plans of putting him back into the educational system. But obviously I still have two that are, and so we still have to try and navigate the system. And so the work that we have to do with my oldest son in order to solidify his values and fortify his mind and his spirit and his soul in order to allow him to navigate that system without coming out of the end of it completely broken is more work. I put more work into fortifying him than I do into educating my youngest. It's actually harder to fortify him and keep him from devolving into this like anxiety riddled, confused individual, because the entire system is set up to just confuse them. I honestly think that that's the whole goal. And I mean, I think that Dave really hit it when he said, that there's been a shift from creating not just drone workers, but now sort of infertile drones that are so obsessed with their emotions, who are so busy looking internally that it just creates an endless sea of division, right? Like, I mean, look at how much division in our society is being created just by this one ideological movement.
Yes.
And the destruction that it's causing at a foundational and cultural level in our country.
And what's interesting, actually, like looking at Dave's graph there, or thing that he put out on the right brain, left brain. I don't know how long is this, like a 2-hour thing, or
it's whenever we're finished.
Oh, okay, cool. No, I'm like, or is it a 1.5? Do we have to split up? No. What's really interesting when you're looking at that as well is like the most, in terms of modern society, when we've looked at like when we've had the most innovation, the most at peace, and all this like everything else, a lot of people would argue that it's when we've been at war, because a war, like, makes us work harder towards inventing. But really, that makes us work harder towards inventing weapons. When we actually look at like times of peace, when the right and the left, and not just that, but the artists and the logical thinkers are working together, that's when we've actually seen some of the most innovation in society. Right. And whenever we start to tear that apart, that's where we start to see things actually tear apart as well. Look where we're at right now. Now, like, just in like, I can relate that this specifically, I can actually relate back to my wife and I. She's much more right brain. I'm much more left brain. We're both creative in regards, like, with our business and that kind of thing. But she'll give me an idea, and I'll look at it from an analytical aspect and reverse engineer her idea so that we can make it happen. We work really well together, so we innovate really well together because we're able to play one off the other. Where what they're doing right now is they're completely focused on the right brain aspects. Everything's emotionally based. Even if you look at the way that the right in Canada now is acting, everything, it's reactive. They're like, almost everything that's going on right now in regards to like hurting society, in regards to like political situations and all this kind of stuff, everything has come down to the left says something and the right reacts,
right,
and then try to justify. And rather than trying to figure out some ways of working together, I'm not suggesting working together with Trudeau, but I am suggesting working like trying to, because like, he should just be put in a jail. But I really had you noticed how I had to like hold back there, eh?
It's okay. We heard the subtext. Yeah. We understood.
But when we're actually looking at like society as a whole, and even school, when you got those kids working together, that you had the creative types working with the analytical types, that were able to work on a project together and actually work well as a group, they would come up with some unbelievable things, because you're getting the ideas from both sides. You're getting the ideas from the sides of the imagination, and the sides that will make it work. We need to get back to focusing on those things, and I think that's one of the things that we can affect in the schools as well, if we can start changing how the school boards are working, as opposed to just indoctrinating them into everything emotional.
Well, I
Yeah.
do think it's very interesting that we've been talking a lot about right brain, left brain, and then the right versus the left in society. And I think if you look at it from a micro or a macro perspective, they're both the same thing, where they're trying to divide us as human beings within ourselves, and they're also trying to divide us within our societies. And so they don't want us functioning well as individuals within our own bodies, where we have, the masculine and feminine working well together within our own selves, and they don't want us working well, as men and women together. They don't want us working well as different races together, and so they're trying so hard to divide the individual, which also divides the society as a whole. The end.
I think I think that is, I mean, that's kind of the overarching narrative of our culture at the moment.
Yeah.
Is finding ways to divide people into their tribes, their intersectional tribes, in order to make people feel like you can only be part of this tribe and belong. You can't be part of multiple tribes.
Mhm.
I mean, it happens, like you said, sort of on a micro and a macro. It happens, in every aspect of what we're doing, right? From our government to our education, in our jobs, in our society, and then, like on social media, like you see it happening everywhere. And unfortunately, I think that there is this culture of permissibility, of division, that has crept in, that has made it so that people feel like it's expected of them to divide themselves into these tribes, and that if they don't do that, that somehow they won't fit in anywhere. And so, you see people do it even on the right, on the left. I mean, how many times have we seen fractures in, say conservative groups, where people, will kind of implode, a group will implode over something very small, instead of finding a way to kind of like do a workaround and agree to disagree, right? And I think that it is because people are so afraid that they won't fit in anywhere if they don't find their micro tribe that they fit into.
Right.
They don't tribe, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm
it's
gonna put my hand up.
I know, right?
No, I kept
Sorry,
thinking we were
Wabbit,
in a
go ahead.
space on Twitter, and I'm like, I need to put my hand up here.
StreamYard needs that.
I felt that earlier.
Yeah.
Earlier when I wanted Dave to pull up the tweet, I was like, I need to put my hand up. How do I do this?
No, I agree and I disagree at the same time. I like by
That's
our
not
very
allowed. You can't disagree with me.
like
How dare you?
Oh, that's it.
But
It's
yeah,
over.
Inconceivable.
No, like I know there's a number of my takes or stances that you don't necessarily agree with either, Belle.
Sometimes, of course.
And that's totally fine. Like, but I think like human nature is tribal by nature. It's a survival mechanism.
I
So
don't disagree.
So for us to say like we need to do away with that, I don't think it's actually entirely possible. But from a higher thinking standpoint, I think we need to learn how to be a little bit more
balanced.
Yeah, balance is a good word for it, I guess. Democratic, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Democratic.
Well,
They've bastardized that word.
It's like a dirty D word at this point.
Well, they're doing away with democracy.
It's a threat to our democracy.
Everything's a threat to our democracy at this point. but at the same time, you figure out as well, I think through, yeah, you're right when you say we've seen groups devolve and all that kind of thing into like tribal mechanisms, but you also figure out some of the people that you want to be around, what their values are, and how you want to hold to those,
Hmm.
which I think can be a strength. That's where the stronger tribe survives at the end. Um, we like even just within this little group here, we're all friends on online and in person,
Hmm.
and there's been times where we haven't necessarily agreed or we've tried to work things out, but I think for the most part we're all reasonably like-minded when it kind of comes down to things.
Hmm.
um However, there's poison within groups too, and that's
Yes.
sometimes when
Hmm.
you see it devolve and it has to go away.
Yes.
And that's the same thing with society. There's a poison in society right now, and it
Hmm.
has to go.
Hmm.
We've got to figure out the ways to get rid of it. Otherwise, it's going to be gone. And like my fear right now is like looking at Canada as Canada. I know we've been talking mostly about kids in school and all that kind of stuff, but when I look at Canada as a whole right now, I don't think I'll ever get back the Canada of the 80s and 90s that I
No.
grew up in.
Nope.
It's
A
gone.
toothpaste is not going back in the tube.
No,
No.
it's gone. They have
Hmm.
they've specifically like knocked in a divide that
Hmm.
is we might be able to bridge, but the divide's still going to be there.
Yeah. Agreed.
Absolutely.
I don't disagree at all on that. I
Hmm.
would, I feel like, and I feel like some people will accuse me of being black pilled in that sense. You know, oh, you're so negative. Like, of course we can come back. The pendulum's swinging, and everything will right itself. But I definitely feel that we have crossed a bridge, and then that bridge has exploded,
Hmm.
and there's just like it's almost impossible to rebuild it at this point. It's hard to see how we could ever kind of like put the chaos back
The ev-
into the
the
box.
evolution of this course, like years down the road, if it keeps going on this course, will be kids growing up and not even wanting to identify as humans.
No, I
Yes.
don't
and
see.
and
I
it,
don't think that's the case because as much as they as there's families that are fighting back against it, and
Hmm.
like let's look at this, and everyone's heard this whole thing. If you take 100 men, put them on an island, or 100 trans men, put them on an island, trans women, I don't know, fucking hell. Oops, I swore. Is that going to get us knocked off of YouTube?
No. We're
Cool.
fine.
All right.
Sue swore in the first like 1 minute.
I know. I heard her, and I'm like, you
Hey,
told us not
I didn't
to.
do it in 15 seconds.
Well, but
It
we've all heard
slipped.
that one. You take 100 trans women, put them on an island with one man, and 100 years from now, there won't be any left. If you take 100 men and 100 women, put them on an island, and you'll have a thriving society. Well,
you could
hopefully.
put 100 women and one man on that island, and they would have a thriving
There you go.
society. I'm just saying.
Maybe. I don't know about that.
And a very
You,
I
tired
mean,
man.
the genetic diversity might be a little weak, but technically speaking.
you'll have a bunch of people. Hey, Dave. Anyway,
Yes.
the any answer. But like the point. Sorry. But the like ultimately the thing is I think humanity is going to come out of it. We're just not going to have what we had. The innocence that
Mhm.
we like the thing is Canada has always been a naive and innocent country.
Hmm.
At least it's been in its heyday.
That's
And
why it
we've been
was
looking
taken over the way it has been, I think.
well no,
Yeah.
we used to have a very tough country. We used to have very tough men and tough women. Like we had we
I have a funny analogy for that if you're interested.
sure.
Well, I saw a comedian actually describe it like Canada and the United States are like siblings that came from the same parents. And then when
That
the
would be
parents got divorced, we went to live with mom. and we got raised on our feelings. And then the United States went and lived with dad and got raised to be tough, right? And but it's a funny analogy, but it's exactly what you're saying, Wabbit, in the sense that, like, there was a time when Canada was a very robust country full of just strong individuals, people who branched out from where they were living, and they took chances and they risked and they built a whole nation. And then somehow along the way we got raised by a really sensitive mom who basically taught us that only our feelings matter, and we had to save Bambi instead of shoot it and eat it. And
Well, you had a different mom than I had. I was
no, my mom was like me. I actually ended up a lot like my mom, but there's
Oh, no.
Canada as
My
a
mom
whole
just
is
wasn't there. I was neglected. That's another story for another day.
Yeah.
But,
no sob story.
no, but I come from a military family, so I was raised on stories of war and the other, like, from World War One to World War Two and going back. Like, we have stories from the War of 1812 that are still, like, they're still in the family history. So it's these are kind of the things that I was raised to think Canada was, like, it was tough men and tough women and so on. And then we had the really easy times of, like, the 70s and 80s and 90s. And, like, I was basically I went to high school in the 90s. So that was like where that was the good times. And it's not that I don't think we'll ever have a return to that, because I think Canada has lost its innocence at this point. There was an innocence to that, like
I
that
agree.
generation that I grew up in. There was this full innocence. There was no longer the wars. There was no
Yeah.
longer the having to be tough and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of grew up in, like, this age of
The golden age.
yeah. It was an age of innocence in Canada, and then
Yeah.
since then we've instead, the rest of Canada since has been fed a diet of comfort. There's never been struggles. There's never been, like, not real struggles, up until this point. And now we're starting to see, like, why, eating sugar all day is bad,
Yeah.
because we've been eating sugar for the last generation, and it's killing the nation. So, but I do think at the same time, I like, to undo the black pill and to add a white pill in there. I think the thing is, like, this is a learning process, and I still think that the good will come to, like, rise to the top, because that the whole trans thing, it can't survive. It's literally a death cult.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, I mean, I'm a believer in
will be the one that rises up to the top.
I'm a believer in the hard times make strong men, right? Like that whole somebody tell me hard times, good times make weak men.
Come on,
Weak men
Dave.
make hard times, whatever that is, right?
She got
it.
I can't quote it.
Where's the screenshot?
But you know what I'm saying? So, like, I am a believer that the hard times will make stronger people. So as you're saying, like, we may not get back to what we used to have. We might get back to a time where humanity sort of, like, takes itself out of its weakness that we're seeing right now. But it's definitely, like, an uphill struggle that is going to take, probably another generation, because if the right now,
we're on, like, statistically, there you go. There's your quote. It took you long enough, man.
I thought she got it, then I realized she didn't get it.
I didn't. I mean, I have a meme I could send you. I don't know.
Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times.
There you go.
There you go.
It's a simplification of the fourth turning.
Okay.
Crickets.
You need to read the fourth turning. And we're in the middle of the fourth turning right now. Is ultimately we're in that weak times create hard men, and that's pretty much where we're almost exactly at that. I give it about another 10, maybe 15 years, and then we start to go into, the 20s era and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
It's I'm oversimplifying the fourth turning, but it's basically we go in cycles of these turnings, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're currently basically sitting in the middle of 4. It's about every 20 years, so 80 years, 80 to 100 years is basically 4 turnings.
Mm.
So basically every generation is a turning.
Yeah,
For the most part.
yeah, pretty close to that, at least, anyways.
That makes
It
sense,
can
actually.
some can go a little bit longer, or a little bit shorter, depending on a variety of things.
Mhm.
But
Government
we're
intervention.
Yeah.
What's
MK
that?
Ultra.
All right, I thought we were doing conspiracy theory crap right now.
I know. We've already gone on so long, we can't get into
Well,
that.
not that it's a theory. I guess it's actually just conspiracy, but
Yeah.
no, I truly believe that we're going to come out of this ahead, and I actually think we will, because we'll be stronger for it. It's like innocence lost,
Yeah,
but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
I agree.
All right, guys. Yes, you are correct. We have kind of gone a little bit longer than I thought we would. So I'm going to start wrapping things up. I feel bad because I didn't get to find out what this polar shift was. So, I was hoping Wabbit would be able to explain it to me like I was alone in my car driving with a mask on.
I can't dumb myself down that low.
So we're gonna wrap
I've
it up
tried.
here.
It just didn't work. What?
So we're gonna wrap it up then. So we've talked.
So we're not talking about hunting? Oh,
Well,
man.
Yeah, no, we're
We'll
gonna
have you back on.
I thought we were going to lead into 3 hours.
Yeah, no,
You mean I can't talk about the grouse that I shot? Man,
we're gonna have to come back. We're gonna have to have a whole hunting episode. It's gonna be strictly hunting. You're not allowed to talk about transgender nonsense. Nothing. It's gonna all be hunting. Today was folk school.
I just got to say, I was so upset yesterday.
That you didn't catch the bear.
No. So, so my buddy's, he's a farmer, and this black bear's been tearing down his fences. And he's turned into a pest, and we're fully within legal rights to shoot the bear.
You are, eh? I was wondering about that.
Yeah, so we baited for him and kind of set out. We knew where his path is. We just set out a few apples. So we're sitting there. We kind of did it into a valley. So him and I were up on the top of the hills, camouflage and all that kind of thing. We're sitting there, and what's the date right now? It's October 7th.
Yeah.
So we're about a month right now. For anyone that's not aware of Ontario laws for hunting and all that kind of stuff, we're a month away from the controlled shoot, which we basically have a week to be able to shoot deer. And that's I have a doe tag this year, which is great, but I'm still a month away. So we're sitting there, we're waiting, and I just hear this little rustling. I look up.
Oh, no way.
And 2 massive does, like they've got to be 5 or 6 year olds, eating the apples that we put out for the bear.
Oh my gosh. And that is Canada in a nutshell.
That sounds like my hunting trip 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Just keep throwing the apples there.
There you go.
And
you're not allowed to bait for deer.
Oh, right.
If I'm so not mistaken, you're going, and we both had clear shots on both of them. Like I had and literally, like it was like she was teasing the bigger one was actually, it was like she was teasing me. She just basically kept like, you're a hunter, Belle. So she just basically kept opening herself up broadside.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Heart, like for 10 minutes.
No.
I kid you not. 10 minutes. And she'd like prance around.
You know what?
She was looking up at me too.
They know.
prance
not
They
around.
know when season hits. They know. I
Here's my-
swear, the does that we saw on our last trip, like same thing. Like they would just walk by and they just stop, like beautiful broadside shot, and they just stare at you. And we've got mule deer, so they got these big honking ears that stick out the side like satellite dishes, right? And they're just staring directly at us, and we're just glassing them and going like, "Are you kidding me?" Like they're like under 100 yards away, and they're just staring right at you. And
This
they
was-
know it's not hunting season for does. I swear they know it.
This was like 50 yards away, and like
Yeah.
10 minutes, she just kept broadsiding me, and then
Yeah.
and then we heard
They
a
know it.
buck in the this massive buck blowing in the bush.
Oh, no.
That sounds dirty. Now that I say it out loud.
That does sound dirty.
But this you just heard the blow
Yeah.
into the bush, and you could tell by this just the amount of sound that came out. He was massive, and both the does just went running off. And I'm looking over at my buddy. I was just like, I want to kill something right now. That bear better come out.
And of course he never did.
No, of course not.
didn't come
Well,
out
the
last
deer,
night.
but the does ate the apples, so the bear wasn't going to come.
Well, the does only ate a couple. Like they ate like 3 or 4 apples. There was 2 bushels down there, so that's okay. I'm going back out tomorrow.
If
Better
I'm not
luck next time.
mistaken, we might be hearing from that buddy coming up pretty soon.
From what?
That buddy of yours.
Which buddy?
Your farmer
I
buddy.
don't know if it's who I'm thinking it is, but I'm pretty sure it is.
I don't know.
We'll tell you when we stop recording.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
All right,
on that note, Ash and Dave, do you have any final thoughts on all things covered this evening?
Ladies first.
I hate being first. Why'd you have to open the door for me, Dave?
Whoa.
Well,
called
first
you a
of all,
lady.
Belle,
Yes.
it's great to hear from you again. Always a pleasure to talk with you. I won't say too much more just because we are kind of getting down to the wire here, and we haven't had Wabbit on yet. So I'll move it on to you. I don't even know why it's taken us so long to have you on the podcast. You're a great friend of ours. We've been to Wabbit's house a number of times. He's had, well, we've talked about him a bunch on the podcast already. Just, he's a great friend, and he's had a lot of get-togethers that we've been invited to, and we've gotten to get together with other people that share the same sorts of thoughts that we have. And so it's been really great getting to know you and becoming friends. So it's been so awesome to have you on the podcast tonight. And I hope that you come back on again, because it's always great to talk to you. And as far as what we talked about tonight, I mean, I love that you have like a white pill at the end there for us, because I think it is important to focus on that. It's easy to get black pilled and stay there, but I think you're right. I think we are just in the fourth turning, as you say, and it's time to get a little tougher and know that life will continue to go on. We just have to try and figure out how we're pivoting with it. So
Yeah.
That's it.
My turn.
Awesome. Dave.
Congratulations to both of you for being excellent parents. Earlier on the podcast, Wabbit, you mentioned LGBTQ alphabet soup, and I thought it was hilarious. And you know how badly I wanted to find this in the last 30 seconds or the next 30 seconds afterwards, but I couldn't find it. And
Love it.
yeah, it was a pleasure having both of you. All the best to both.
Awesome. Well,
Thank you.
Belle,
Yes, thank you.
thank you so much for coming back and having another chat with us. Wabbit, thank you for making your debut appearance with us. It's been a blast, like I knew it would be. I always enjoy speaking to both of you, and both of your pages on X are amazing. So like I said at the beginning, please keep doing what you're doing. Everyone listening, if you haven't checked out their pages, please do so and give them a follow. Again, Frozen Belle is at Frozen_Belle. And for Wabbit, we have at Wabbit Warrior. So thank you guys both. And be sure to come back anytime. Tammy is up next and has advised me that we are freestyling next week. You know I love a good freestyle episode. So God knows what crazy lunacy we will get into. On that note, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you again to our guests. Come back anytime. Remember to big it harder, everybody, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye.
Bye,
Peace.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.